Have you ever felt like something was wrong in your home, but you couldn't quite put your finger on what it was? Have you noticed that the atmosphere feels suffocating, like there's an invisible spider web wrapping around everything and everyone inside? Dear brothers and sisters, September isn't just another month. It's the month of the cross. The Church celebrates the exaltation of the Holy Cross on the 14th. And those who understand what this date means spiritually know we're in a time of battle, a time of purification, of inner healing, and above all, of liberation. You might be experiencing something you can't explain, arguments that erupt like volcanoes without warning, anxiety that clings to you like wet clothes you can't remove, spiritual exhaustion that feels like walking through quicksand every single day, silences that echo with unspoken accusations, nightmares that leave you feeling hunted even after you wake up, dark emotions that creep in like fog, thick and cold and uninvited. Maybe this isn't just stress. Maybe this isn't just life being difficult. Maybe you're experiencing a real spiritual attack. And here's what should concern you most. Maybe this attack is being fed by something you're harboring inside your own heart, inside your own home. But breathe. You don't need to start throwing things away or falling into panic. What I'm about to reveal has everything to do with what's buried in your soul and nothing to do with what's displayed on your walls. Because Padre Pio used to say something that cuts straight to the truth. The devil enters through the cracks of the soul that you don't want to look at. Sometimes the enemy isn't coming from outside. He's already inside, feeding on what we refuse to acknowledge, the unforgiveness we've disguised as moving on, the wounds we've covered with fake smiles, the secrets we've buried so deep we almost believe they don't exist anymore. And he knows exactly where to look. He feeds on hidden pain, like a parasite feeds on blood. He grows stronger in the darkness we refuse to bring into the light. He builds his strongholds in the places we mark, do not enter, in our own hearts. Today, I'm going to expose 3 spiritual contaminants you might be carrying that are draining your peace faster than a broken faucet drains a bathtub. 3 things that, if you don't remove them now, will continue to poison your atmosphere, your relationships, and your connection with God. But if you have the courage to face them, the breakthrough you've been praying for could start today. These aren't objects sitting on shelves. They're not books or pictures or decorations. They're invisible toxins that create an environment where darkness feels at home, where peace struggles to survive, where God's voice gets muffled by the noise of spiritual interference. The first one whispers lies so softly you think they're your own thoughts. The second one builds walls so gradually you don't notice until you're completely isolated. The third one creates a barrier so subtle that you keep wondering why your prayers feel like they're hitting a ceiling. If you're ready to reclaim your spiritual territory and clean house from the inside out, write in the comments, "Today I clean my spiritual house." This isn't just a comment. It's a declaration of war against everything that's been stealing your peace. I'm about to show you exactly what these 3 things are and how to evict them permanently. Because when you clean your spiritual house, your physical house begins to reflect that same peace, and the cross that seemed like your burden becomes your greatest weapon. The enemy has been camping in your territory long enough. Today, we take it back. The first thing that must be evicted from your spiritual house is resentment, but this isn't the kind of anger that explodes and burns out quickly. This is the slow-burning coal that never quite goes cold. The ember that glows quietly in the basement of your heart, sending toxic smoke through every room of your life. Resentment is the master of disguise. It dresses up as justice, whispering, "You have every right to feel this way." It masquerades as protection, convincing you that holding on to anger somehow shields you from being hurt again. It even pretends to be loyalty to yourself, making you believe that forgiving means forgetting, that letting go means giving up. But here's what resentment really is. It's a prison where you're both the guard and the prisoner. You think you're punishing someone else by refusing to forgive them, but they're living rent-free in your head while you pay the emotional mortgage every single day. Padre Pio, with his penetrating spiritual insight, warned us, the soul that harbors resentment moves away from God's light. Think of it like this. Resentment is spiritual smog. It doesn't block out the sun completely, but it makes everything look gray and dim. God's love is still shining, His blessings are still available, but you can't see them clearly through the haze of bitterness. And resentment spreads like a contagious disease. It infects your tone of voice, turning even casual conversations into verbal battlegrounds. It poisons your facial expressions, making you look like you're perpetually tasting something sour. It seeps into your body language, creating an invisible force field that keeps people at a distance even when you're trying to be friendly. Your family feels it most. Children have radar for emotional toxicity, and they pick up on resentment even when you think you're hiding it perfectly. They start walking on eggshells, monitoring your mood before they ask for anything. Spouses sense the distance, the way you're physically present but emotionally checked out. Friends notice the edge in your voice, the way conversations feel like navigating a minefield. But the most devastating effect of resentment isn't what it does to your relationships with people. It's what it does to your relationship with God. When you're carrying bitterness, your prayers feel mechanical, your worship feels hollow. That intimate connection you once enjoyed with the divine seems clouded, like trying to have a conversation through thick glass. There was a woman who carried resentment toward her ex-husband for 8 years after their divorce. 8 years of her children asking why Daddy couldn't come to their school plays. 8 years of family events divided into his side and her side. 8 years of her new marriage suffering because she brought the poison from her old relationship into her new one. The original betrayal had lasted 6 months. The resentment poisoned 8 years. Do the math. She gave her ex-husband more power over her life after the divorce than he'd had during the marriage. One evening, exhausted by the weight of carrying this burning coal everywhere she went, she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the bitter woman staring back. That night, she knelt before a crucifix and said something that changed everything. Jesus, I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of this poison running through my veins. I'm giving this to you, not because he deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve freedom. She didn't feel a warm rush of forgiveness. She didn't suddenly want to send her ex-husband a Christmas card. But she made a decision. She would no longer feed the resentment. She would no longer rehearse the betrayal. She would no longer imagine conversations where she got to tell him exactly what she thought. Within 3 months, her children noticed their mom was different. Her new husband said it was like living with a completely different person. The atmosphere in their home shifted from tense to peaceful, from guarded to open. Here's the truth about resentment that might shock you. You're not holding it, it's holding you. Every time you revisit the offense, every time you retell the story, every time you imagine what you should have said, you're feeding the monster that's devouring your peace. To evict resentment, you don't need to feel differently. You just need to choose differently. Stop feeding it. Stop nurturing it. Stop giving it a comfortable place to live in your heart. Because when you release resentment, you're not doing anyone else a favor. You're setting yourself free to love again, trust again, hope again. Speaking of spiritual protection and cleaning the darkness from your heart, many of you have been asking me how to build stronger spiritual defenses, how to pray with the kind of power that Padre Pio demonstrated every day of his life. That's exactly why we created the ebook, The Power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, Miracles, Protection, and Divine Graces. This isn't just another prayer book. This is a complete spiritual arsenal that will teach you to pray the rosary with deeper devotion and understanding. Reveal the documented miracles and testimonies of those who experienced its supernatural power. Share Padre Pio's most profound teachings about prayer and spiritual warfare. Provide you with a 30-day prayer guide with specific daily intentions to fortify your faith, and give you access to special prayers for protection, healing, and complete spiritual liberation. The Rosary was Padre Pio's secret weapon against every form of spiritual attack, and today it can become yours too. Don't let this opportunity pass to strengthen your spiritual life with material that has already transformed thousands of lives. To access it, simply click the link pinned in the comments. The second toxic resident that must leave your spiritual house is hurt. If resentment burns hot like fire, hurt runs cold like ice water in your veins. It seems more delicate than resentment, almost innocent in its quietness. But don't be fooled by its gentle appearance. Hurt is poison disguised as sensitivity, destruction dressed up as vulnerability. Hurt is the voice that whispers, "You're not enough," when someone doesn't return your text message. It's the ache that spreads through your chest like spilled ink when you see others receiving the recognition you thought you deserved. It's the tears that ambush you at the grocery store when a stranger's laugh reminds you of someone who used to think you were funny. While resentment makes you want to fight, hurt makes you want to hide. It builds walls with bricks made of disappointment and mortar mixed with tears. It turns you into an emotional hermit, keeping everyone at arm's length because closeness means vulnerability, and vulnerability means the possibility of more pain. Hurt transforms you into a detective of rejection, analyzing every facial expression, dissecting every conversation, looking for evidence that people don't really want you around. You start reading between lines that don't exist, hearing criticism in compliments, finding abandonment in temporary absence. The Bible warns us with surgical precision. See to it that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. Hebrews 12:15. Notice it doesn't say bitter tree, it says bitter root. Hurt starts underground, invisible, spreading its poison through the soil of your soul before you even realize it's there. And that's exactly what happens when hurt takes root. It contaminates everything. Your prayers change from conversations with God to complaints about God. Your faith weakens because you start wondering if God really cares about your pain. Your relationship with Him grows distant because you're treating Him like another person who might disappoint you. Here's where Mary, the mother of sorrows, becomes our greatest teacher. She knew hurt like no other human being. She watched her son be rejected by the very people he came to save. She felt every lash of the whip as if it struck her own back. She experienced the ultimate hurt, watching her innocent child die a criminal's death while she stood powerless to help. If anyone had the right to be hurt, to feel abandoned by God, to build walls around her heart, it was Mary. But she didn't harbor hurt. She didn't build monuments to her pain. She didn't let her wounds become her identity. Instead, she stood. She stayed. She trusted even when trust felt impossible. That's what she wants for you. A heart that can be wounded but not broken, disappointed but not destroyed, hurt but not hardened. She knows that carrying hurt is like walking with a thorn in your foot. You can still move, but every step reminds you of the pain, and eventually it changes your entire way of walking. Hurt affects your home differently than resentment. Where resentment creates explosive conflict, hurt creates suffocating silence. Family members start tiptoeing around you, afraid that any wrong word might send you deeper into your emotional cave. Conversations become shallow because depth requires risk, and you're no longer willing to risk being hurt again. But here's the truth about hurt that changes everything. It's often evidence that you loved deeply. The depth of your hurt reveals the depth of your investment. A person who never cared wouldn't feel such profound pain when their care isn't returned. The key to healing hurt isn't to stop caring. It's to place your deepest needs in God's hands instead of in human hands. People will disappoint you, not because they're evil, but because they're human. When you expect from people what only God can give, you're setting yourself up for a lifetime of hurt. Tonight, before you close your eyes, place your hand over your heart and pray, Jesus, I release every hurt that has made me afraid to love fully. Heal what needs healing, but don't let pain turn me into someone I was never meant to be. Help me love with wisdom, trust with discernment, and give with healthy boundaries, because a heart that refuses to be hardened by hurt is a heart that remains open to miracles. The third and most dangerous squatter in your spiritual house is unconfessed sin. This one operates in complete darkness, invisible to human eyes, but broadcasting like a neon sign in the spiritual realm. You might appear to everyone around you as a pillar of faith. You could be leading Bible studies, singing in the choir, even counseling others in their spiritual struggles. But if you're carrying a serious, unconfessed sin, there's a concrete wall between you and God's grace that's affecting every area of your life. Unconfessed sin is like having a locked basement in your soul. You can redecorate every other room, fill them with beautiful furniture, hang inspiring pictures on every wall, but that basement remains dark, damp, and dangerous. And it's precisely in that hidden place where the enemy sets up his headquarters. The poison seeps upward through the floorboards of your consciousness. Your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling because there's a barrier between you and heaven that you put there yourself. Your worship feels hypocritical because you know you're hiding part of your reality from the God you're claiming to praise. Your peace is constantly under siege because you're living with the exhausting fear of being exposed. Padre Pio understood this spiritual dynamic better than almost anyone. Frequent confession is the key to salvation. When you confess, it's like opening all the windows in a house that's been sealed shut. Light floods in, fresh air circulates, and the suffocating darkness is forced to retreat. But when you hide, when you rationalize, when you convince yourself it's not that serious, you're essentially boarding up the windows and inviting the darkness to make itself at home. Here's what makes unconfessed sin so insidious. It grows in the dark. What started as a manageable problem becomes a mountain of shame. The guilt compounds daily like interest on a debt you can't pay. The distance from God feels more insurmountable with each passing week. You start believing the enemy's lie that you've gone too far, done too much, waited too long for forgiveness to be possible. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a cut on your hand, but instead of cleaning and bandaging it, you just cover it with makeup and pretend it doesn't exist. What happens? It gets infected. The infection spreads. What could have been healed with simple first aid becomes a serious medical emergency that requires radical intervention. That's what happens to sin that stays hidden. It festers. It spreads. It contaminates areas of your life that seem completely unrelated. Your marriage starts suffering because you're emotionally unavailable, too consumed with internal shame to be fully present. Your children sense that something is wrong with dad or mom, but can't identify what. Your friendships become superficial because true intimacy requires vulnerability, and you can't risk anyone getting too close to your secret. I knew a man who carried the weight of a moral failure for over 5 years. 5 years of sitting in church, feeling like an imposter. 5 years of avoiding eye contact with certain people because he was convinced they could somehow see his shame. 5 years of his family slowly fragmenting because the head of the household was spiritually compromised and everyone could feel it, even if they couldn't name it. The actual sin had lasted only a few weeks. But 5 years of unconfessed guilt had poisoned his entire family system. His home felt like a mausoleum instead of a sanctuary. His wife knew something was destroying their intimacy, but couldn't identify the cause. His teenagers started acting out, unconsciously responding to the spiritual darkness they sensed but couldn't understand. Finally, during a sleepless night when the weight felt like it might crush him, he made a decision that changed everything. He called his priest and scheduled a confession for the next day. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. The absolution was immediate, but the transformation was miraculous. His wife later told me it was like her husband came back from the dead. The man who walked into that confessional was a ghost. The man who walked out was resurrected. Within a month, their entire family dynamic had shifted. The heaviness lifted, the walls came down, the light returned. Here's what he shared with me. I had convinced myself that confessing would destroy everything, but keeping it secret was what was actually destroying everything. The fear of confession was 1,000 times worse than confession itself. If you've been carrying something for months or years, something that makes you cringe when you think about it, something that creates a knot in your stomach during worship, today is your day of liberation. God already paid the price on Calvary. The debt is cancelled. The door is open. He's not waiting to condemn you. He's waiting to embrace you. Don't spend another day carrying what Christ already carried for you. Now that you understand these 3 spiritual contaminants, here's your battle plan for reclaiming your spiritual territory before the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. Step 1. Conduct a fearless spiritual inventory. Find a quiet place where you won't be interrupted and ask yourself these piercing questions. Who lives rent-free in my head because I refuse to forgive them? What wound am I protecting so carefully that it's become infected? What am I hiding from God that's creating distance between us? Don't rush this. Let the Holy Spirit spotlight what needs to be exposed. Step 2. Take concrete, decisive action. If resentment is your poison, write down the name of someone you need to forgive and commit to praying blessing over them for 7 consecutive days. If hurt is your prison, make a conscious decision to stop rehearsing painful memories and start speaking healing words over your own heart. If unconfessed sin is your barrier, schedule a confession this week, no matter how terrifying it feels. Step 3. Pray this liberation prayer before a crucifix. Jesus, I place at your wounded feet my resentments, my hurts, and the sins that shame me. Let your precious blood wash my house, my soul, my entire history. In this sacred month of the cross, let your power shatter every chain that separates me from peace. I choose freedom over bondage, light over darkness, love over fear. Transform my heart and make my home a sanctuary where your presence dwells powerfully. Amen. Watch how the spiritual atmosphere begins to shift. Feel the supernatural lightness that follows genuine release. These 3 spiritual toxins, resentment, hurt, and unconfessed sin, are like invisible pollutants that don't just disrupt your inner world, but contaminate your home's atmosphere, your family's emotional health, and your household's spiritual climate. When everything feels suffocating and dark, it's often because these poisons have reached critical levels. Padre Pio spoke profound truth when he said, "The cross is the sign of true love." Today, don't just carry your cross, let it carry you to freedom. When you courageously clean your spiritual house, when you evict what doesn't belong, you create sacred space for God's presence to flood every corner of your life. If this message pierced your heart, help us bring this hope to more families trapped in spiritual warfare. Smash that like button, share this video with someone who's fighting the same battles, and consider joining our community by subscribing and becoming a member. Together, we're building an army of believers who refuse to let the enemy steal their peace. Remember, when a heart chooses purity, the entire house becomes a sanctuary.